I am Emily Thompson, 26 years old, the only daughter of a wealthy family in Chicago. My father, Michael Thompson, is a successful businessman with a reputation for being harsh and controlling. My mother passed away 4 years ago from cancer, leaving me alone with him. That rainy evening when he abandoned me 12 miles from home to teach me a lesson, he never anticipated what would happen next. He had no idea about my bodyguard, the man who had been watching over me for years. If you're enjoying this story so far, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and let me know in the comments where you're watching from. Trust me, you'll want to see how this ends. I grew up in a sprawling estate in the affluent suburbs of Chicago, surrounded by luxury that most people only dream of. Our 7-bedroom mansion sat on 5 acres of manicured grounds, complete with a tennis court, swimming pool, and a view of Lake Michigan that took your breath away. But the beauty of our home masked the tension that filled every room. Thompson Enterprises, our family business, was a leader in commercial real estate development across the Midwest. My father had built it from the ground up, transforming a small construction company into a corporate empire worth hundreds of millions. In Chicago business circles, the Thompson name opened doors and commanded respect. We attended charity galas, had a private box at Wrigley Field, and vacationed in places most people only see in magazines. My father, Michael Thompson, was a man defined by success and control. At 57, he had the sharp features of someone who rarely smiled and the rigid posture of a person who never truly relaxed. His salt and pepper hair was always perfectly styled, his custom suits impeccably tailored. To the outside world, he was brilliant, driven, even philanthropic. But behind closed doors, he was a different man entirely. Since my mother died, his need to control every aspect of my life had intensified. He monitored my spending, scrutinized my friendships, and expected detailed accounts of my daily activities. Our conversations were less discussions and more interrogations. Everything was a test, and failure was not an option in his world. The dynamic between us changed dramatically after we lost my mother. Margaret Thompson had been my buffer, my advocate, the only person who could soften my father's harsh edges. She had been diagnosed with stage 4 ovarian cancer, and was gone within 8 months. I watched her wither away while my father buried himself in work, only appearing at the hospital when absolutely necessary. After she died, it was as if he blamed me for not being enough to keep him engaged with our family. I graduated from Northwestern University with honors, earning a degree in finance just as he had demanded. During college, I had dreamed of pursuing a career in environmental law, but that was dismissed as impractical and emotional. After graduation, I took my assigned place at Thompson Enterprises as a junior executive, where I worked twice as hard as anyone else just to prove I deserved to be there. My father believed in teaching through hardship. When I was 15, he left me at a ski resort with no money or phone after I missed curfew by 20 minutes. I had to work in the resort kitchen washing dishes to earn enough for a bus ticket home. When I was 19, he canceled my credit cards after I questioned one of his business decisions at a family dinner, forcing me to live off my savings for 3 months. Each time, he called it a lesson in responsibility or respect. Despite everything, a part of me still sought his approval. I kept thinking that if I could just prove myself, work hard enough, be perfect enough, he would finally see me as worthy. It was exhausting living under the weight of expectations I could never quite meet. Most people in my life were chosen or approved by my father. The exception was Daniel Harris, my 34-year-old bodyguard. He had been hired secretly by my Uncle David, my mother's brother, before he died of a heart attack 2 years ago. Uncle David had been suspicious of how my father treated me after my mother's death. As his health declined, he arranged for Daniel to watch over me without my father's knowledge. Daniel was former military, 6'3", with dark hair and observant eyes that missed nothing. He kept his distance, blending into the background of my life so perfectly that even I sometimes forgot he was there. But he was always watching, always present, when I needed him most. Uncle David had instructed him to protect me not just from physical harm, but from my father's psychological games as well. Though neither of us knew how important that protection would become. The quarterly board meeting at Thompson Enterprises was held in the glass-walled conference room on the 30th floor of our downtown Chicago headquarters. The spring morning was bright, with sunlight streaming through the windows and reflecting off the polished mahogany table where 12 board members sat in expensive leather chairs. I had spent weeks preparing for this meeting, researching market trends and developing a comprehensive proposal for expanding our business into sustainable commercial developments. My presentation materials were meticulously prepared, my navy blue suit perfectly pressed, I felt confident as I stood to present. Despite the dismissive look my father gave me from his position at the head of the table. For 20 minutes, I outlined my vision for Thompson Green Developments, a new division that would focus on environmentally sustainable office buildings and retail spaces. The market research was clear, I explained, showing slides of growing demand for LEED-certified spaces and the premium rents they commanded. I had financial projections, architectural concepts, and even preliminary interest from 3 major potential clients. This wasn't just an idealistic pitch, it was a sound business opportunity that aligned with changing market demands. Several board members were nodding as I spoke. Susan Mitchell, our CFO, looked genuinely impressed. Edward Collins, our longest-serving board member, was taking detailed notes. Even Richard Lee, who rarely showed enthusiasm for anything, seemed engaged by the numbers I was presenting. I was just transitioning to the implementation timeline when my father cleared his throat and interrupted. "That's quite enough, Emily," he said. "While this presentation shows initiative, it demonstrates a fundamental misunderstanding of our business model and client base." He turned to address the board, rather than me. "My daughter has always had these idealistic notions, which I blame on too much time in liberal academia. This green initiative would alienate our core clients and dilute our brand. I cannot support it." The room fell silent. I felt heat rise to my face but fought to maintain my composure. "With all due respect, Father," I replied, keeping my voice steady, "the data doesn't support that conclusion. Our clients' surveys indicate that 78% would pay a premium for spaces with reduced carbon footprints and lower operating costs." I showed the next slide, which displayed the survey results in clear, unmistakable numbers. "Those numbers can be manipulated to show whatever you want," he said dismissively. "You lack the experience to understand the complexities of client relationships that go beyond surface-level questionnaires." "Actually, Michael," Susan Mitchell interjected, looking at my father with a slight frown, "Emily's research methodology is quite sound. I reviewed it myself, and the financial projections are conservative, if anything." Edward Collins nodded in agreement. "The market is shifting, whether we like it or not. Perhaps we should consider a pilot project to test the waters." I could see my father's jaw tighten, his knuckles whitening as he gripped his pen. Being challenged was bad enough. Being challenged and contradicted in front of the board, partially in support of his daughter's ideas, was unforgivable. "Since when do we make decisions based on trends and surveys?" he asked, his voice dangerously calm. "Thompson Enterprises has succeeded by setting trends, not following them. If Emily wants to play with environmental initiatives, perhaps she should join a nonprofit instead of trying to fundamentally alter a business she barely understands." The meeting continued, but the damage was done. My proposal was tabled for further review, which everyone knew was corporate speak for a slow death. As the board members filed out, several gave me sympathetic glances. Susan squeezed my arm gently as she passed. When only my father and I remained in the conference room, he stood and straightened his tie. "I need you to come with me this afternoon," he said. "If you're so interested in market research, we should visit the Elmwood site too. Assess its suitability for your green nonsense." The Elmwood site was an old industrial property 30 miles outside the city that the company had acquired in a portfolio purchase. It wasn't even on the list of properties I had included in my proposal. "Is that really necessary?" I asked. "Are you questioning me again?" His voice was ice cold. "No," I said, recognizing the dangerous tone. "I'll rearrange my afternoon." 2 hours later, I sat in the passenger seat of my father's black Mercedes as we drove out of the city. The silence between us was heavy and oppressive. I checked my phone, responding to work emails to avoid conversation, acutely aware of his growing anger beside me. Dark clouds gathered on the horizon as we drove further from Chicago, and soon fat raindrops began to hit the windshield. The weather matched my sense of foreboding. Something wasn't right about this impromptu trip, but I couldn't place what was bothering me. My father took an exit I didn't recognize, turning onto a rural road that I was certain didn't lead to the Elmwood property. The rain intensified, drumming against the roof of the car as the wipers fought to clear the windshield. Through the blur of water, I could see nothing but trees and occasional farmhouses. We were far from the city now, in an area I didn't recognize. My stomach tightened with anxiety as I realized we had been driving for nearly an hour with no sign of our supposed destination. The Mercedes slowed, suddenly pulling onto a gravel shoulder beside a stretch of empty road. There were no buildings in sight, just fields and distant tree lines obscured by sheets of rain. My father put the car in park but left the engine running. The wipers continued their rhythmic sweep as he turned to face me. "Do you have any idea how embarrassing that was?" he asked, his voice low and controlled. "What are you talking about?" I asked, though I knew exactly what he meant. "Don't play dumb, Emily," he said. "That little performance in the boardroom. Undermining me in front of the entire board." "I wasn't undermining you," I said carefully. "I was presenting a valid business opportunity based on solid research." He laughed, a short, humorless sound. "You think a few months in the company qualifies you to dictate our direction. You think you know better than me. I built this company while you were playing in sandboxes. I'm 26 years old. Father," I reminded him, "I have a Northwestern degree in finance and have been working in the business for 5 years. Not a few months. And you think that entitles you to respect. Respect is earned, not given because of a piece of paper from an overpriced university." The rain pounded harder on the roof, almost drowning out his words. Lightning flashed in the distance, followed by a low rumble of thunder. "You have no idea what it takes to run a company like Thompson Enterprises," he continued. "You think it's all about trends and feel-good initiatives. It's about hard decisions, about strength, something you clearly lack." "Is that what this is about?" I asked, gesturing to "Where are we, anyway? This isn't the way to Elmwood. Consider this a lesson in humility," he said, his eyes cold. "Give me your phone." "What? Your phone, Emily? Now?" I hesitated, then handed it over. He took it and dropped it into his jacket pocket. "Your wallet, too," he said. A chill ran through me that had nothing to do with the air conditioning blowing from the vents. "Father, what are you doing?" "Teaching you what you seem unable to learn any other way," he replied. "You think you can challenge me? Think you can turn my own board against me? You need to remember your place." He held out his hand expectantly. With growing dread, I reached for my purse and extracted my wallet, placing it in his outstretched palm. He took it and then reached across me to open the glove compartment, removing a small GPS device that I hadn't known was there. "A tracking chip," he explained with a thin smile. "From your car? Did you think I wouldn't notice your little secret meetings with Susan and Edward? Did you think I don't know every move you make?" The realization that he had been monitoring me sent a wave of both anger and fear through my body. How long had he been tracking me? What else did he know? "Get out," he said suddenly. "What? You heard me. Get out of the car." "But we're in the middle of nowhere," I protested, gesturing to the downpour outside. "It has to be at least 10 or 12 miles back to town." "Then you have plenty of time to think about loyalty and respect," he said coldly. "Maybe the walk will clear your head of these ridiculous notions of undermining me. This is insane. Father, even for you." His face hardened. "Your mother would be so disappointed in what you've become. Ungrateful, disrespectful. Now get out before I remove you myself." The mention of my mother stung like a physical blow. He knew exactly where to aim to cause the most pain. I reached for the door handle, my hand trembling slightly. Before I could push it open, he reached across me again, this time removing my light blazer from my shoulders. "You won't be needing this," he said, tossing it into the back seat. "A little discomfort builds character." I stepped out into the pouring rain, instantly drenched as water cascaded from the sky. The cold was shocking, my silk blouse offering no protection as it clung to my skin. I turned to face my father through the still open passenger door. "Is this really the kind of man you want to be?" I asked, surprising myself with how steady my voice remained. For a moment, something flickered in his eyes, something almost like doubt. Then his expression hardened again. "When you're ready to apologize and remember your place, you can call me, if you can find a phone." He reached across and pulled the passenger door closed. I didn't plead or bang on the window. I didn't cry or shout as he might have expected. I simply stood there, rain streaming down my face, and watched as he executed a U-turn and drove back the way we had come, taillights glowing red through the curtain of rain before disappearing around a bend. The silence after his car left was absolute, except for the drumming of rain on the ground around me. I was completely alone on an unfamiliar road, miles from anywhere, without phone, money, or identification. My white blouse was now transparent, my hair plastered to my head, water running in rivulets down my face and neck. My tailored pants were soaked through, and my leather pumps squelched with every step. I looked in the direction my father had driven, then in the opposite direction. With no better option, I began to walk, following the road in the direction we had been traveling originally. Each step was uncomfortable, blisters already forming on my feet from walking in wet heels. The rational part of my mind categorized my situation: exposure to the elements, risk of hypothermia despite the mild spring temperature, vulnerability as a woman alone on a deserted road, no means of communication, no resources. The emotional part of my mind cycled through disbelief, anger, hurt, and finally, a strange sense of clarity. This wasn't the first time my father had abandoned me to teach me a lesson. But something told me it would be the last. The rain showed no signs of letting up as I trudged along the empty road. My leather pumps, designed for boardrooms rather than country highways, pinched painfully with every step. I had walked for perhaps 10 minutes, though it felt much longer, when the sound of an approaching vehicle made me turn. Through the gray curtain of rain, I saw headlights approaching from behind me, illuminating the water droplets in twin beams. As the vehicle drew closer, I could make out the shape of a black pickup truck. It slowed as it approached, then pulled onto the shoulder about 20 feet ahead of me. The driver's door opened, and a tall figure stepped out, silhouetted against the headlights. Even through the rain, I recognized the broad shoulders and alert posture. Immediately, relief flooded through me. Daniel Harris stood calmly in the downpour, wearing a dark jacket and jeans, his expression professionally neutral as always. But there was something in his eyes, as he approached a controlled anger that I had never seen before. "Miss Thompson," he said formally, though we were the only two people for miles. "I believe you could use a ride." A laugh bubbled up from somewhere deep inside me, borderline hysterical with relief. "You could say that, Daniel. How did you find me?" He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small device, protected from the rain by his cupped hand. It was a tracking app showing a pulsing blue dot, our current location. "I put a tracker on your father's car 6 months ago," he explained, his deep voice matter-of-fact. "Your uncle insisted before he passed. He was concerned about the lessons your father might try to teach you." The rain plastered his dark hair to his forehead, but he seemed unbothered by the downpour. Without another word, he removed his jacket and placed it around my shoulders. The warmth and weight of it were immediately comforting. "Come on," he said, gesturing to the truck. "Let's get you dry." The interior of Daniel's truck was meticulously clean and smelled faintly of leather and pine. He turned the heater to full blast as soon as we were inside, then reached behind the seat and pulled out a duffel bag. "There's a change of clothes in here," he said, handing me the bag. "Sweats, t-shirt, socks, not your usual style, but they're dry. And there's a towel." "You just happen to have women's clothes in your truck?" I asked, raising an eyebrow despite my shivering. A ghost of a smile crossed his face. "They're my sister's. I keep emergency supplies in the truck part of the job." As I looked through the bag, he pulled a water bottle from a compartment in the door and handed it to me. I hadn't realized how thirsty I was until that moment. The cool water was heaven against my throat. "Thank you," I said after drinking deeply. "Not just for this, for everything." He nodded once, then turned slightly in his seat to give me privacy as I used the towel to dry my hair and face. We sat in silence for a moment, the only sounds the drumming of rain on the roof and the gentle hum of the heater. "He took your phone," Daniel asked finally, though it wasn't really a question, "and my wallet, and he found the tracker in my car." "I still don't know how he discovered that." Daniel's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "I can guess. Richard Lee. He's been on your father's payroll for years, feeding him information, not just company data, personal information, too." "The board member?" I asked, surprised. "But he voted against my father today. He seemed supportive of my proposal." Daniel nodded. "That was unexpected. Maybe he's developing a conscience. Or maybe he's playing a longer game." He reached into the console between the seats and pulled out a smartphone, handing it to me. "Secure line. Your uncle had me prepare it just in case. It has all your important contacts already loaded." I took the phone, turning it over in my hands. Uncle David had thought of everything. How had he known what my father might do? Had there been incidents I didn't know about? "Your uncle was worried about your father's behavior after your mother passed," Daniel said, as if reading my thoughts. "David said Michael had always been controlling, but after Margaret died, he became unpredictable, possibly dangerous." I stared out at the rain-washed landscape. My mind flashed back to countless small moments. The increasing isolation, the subtle threats, the constant undermining. Had it really gotten so bad that my uncle feared for my safety? "Tell me about yourself, Daniel," I said suddenly, wanting to change the subject. "We've known each other for 2 years. But I realize I know almost nothing about you." "There's not much to tell," he replied, his eyes on the road as he pulled back onto the highway, heading away from the direction my father had gone. "Former Army Ranger, 8 years of service. Private security work after that. Family?" I asked. A moment of hesitation. "Not anymore. Lost my parents in a car accident when I was in Afghanistan. Sister was with them." The clothes, I realized, looking down at the duffel bag. I'm sorry, Daniel. He nodded once, acknowledging the sympathy without dwelling on it. It's been 5 years. We drove in companionable silence for a while, the rhythmic sweep of the wipers and the soft hum of the engine creating a cocoon of calm after the chaos of the day. For the first time in years, I felt safe, not just physically protected, but understood in a way that went deeper. What will you do now? He asked eventually. Go back home. I thought about the question. The word home held little meaning anymore. The mansion in Chicago had felt like a beautiful prison for years now. No, I said firmly. I'm not going back there. Not tonight, maybe not ever. I need to figure some things out first. He nodded, as if he'd expected this answer. I know a place, he said. Safe. Off the grid. Your father won't find you there. I know I'm supposed to be the employer in this relationship, I said with a small smile. But right now, I think I'll follow your lead. For the first time since I'd known him, Daniel Harris smiled, fully transforming his usually stoic face. It was like watching the sun break through storm clouds. Your uncle would be proud of you, he said. He always said you were stronger than you knew. As we drove away from the site of my abandonment, something shifted inside me. The hurt and shock were still there, but above them rose a steely determination. My father had made a critical error today. He had pushed me past fear into clarity, and he had no idea what I was capable of when I stopped being afraid of him. The Bayside Inn was a discreet, upscale establishment tucked away in a small coastal town 30 miles north of Chicago. Daniel chose it specifically because Thompson Enterprises had no properties or business connections in the area. He parked the truck in the underground garage and escorted me through a service entrance to avoid the main lobby cameras, his training evident in every careful move. The suite he had arranged was spacious and elegant, with a separate sitting room and bedroom, neutral decor, and large windows overlooking the harbor. Under different circumstances, it might have been a pleasant getaway. I changed into the borrowed clothes, a simple gray sweatshirt and black yoga pants that were slightly too long. My designer work clothes hung dripping in the bathroom. When I emerged, Daniel was on the phone, his voice low and serious. He ended the call when he saw me. Jennifer Davis will be here in 20 minutes, he said, pocketing his phone. Who's Jennifer Davis? I asked, combing through my damp hair with my fingers. Your uncle's attorney, he replied, and now yours, if you choose to retain her. David set it up before he passed. She has information you need to hear. I sank onto the couch, suddenly overwhelmed by the events of the day. My father had abandoned me on a rural road in a rainstorm. I was now hiding in a hotel with my secret bodyguard, waiting to meet a lawyer I hadn't known existed. My life had transformed into something unrecognizable in the span of hours. Daniel must have noticed my expression. He sat in the armchair across from me, his posture relaxed but alert as always. Your uncle anticipated something like this, he said. Not this exact scenario, but he knew Michael might go too far someday. How? I asked. How did he know when I didn't? You were too close to see it clearly, Daniel explained. And your father was careful. The isolation happened gradually. The control, the monitoring, the emotional manipulation, it all escalated so slowly. You couldn't see the full picture. He leaned forward, his expression serious. What your father did today wasn't just cruel, Emily, it was dangerous, abandoning you without resources or communication, miles from anywhere. In bad weather that crosses a line. I knew he was right. If Daniel hadn't found me, I would have been walking for hours in the rain. At risk of exposure, vulnerable to whoever might have come along. The realization of how precarious my situation had been sent a chill through me despite the warm clothes and heated room. A gentle knock at the door interrupted my thoughts. Daniel checked the peephole before opening it, revealing a woman in her mid-40s with chin-length silver-streaked black hair and sharp, intelligent eyes behind stylish glasses. She carried a leather briefcase and wore a charcoal gray suit that spoke of quiet wealth. Miss Thompson, she said, extending her hand after Daniel closed and locked the door behind her. I'm Jennifer Davis. I was your uncle's attorney for 15 years, and he asked me to assist you if certain circumstances arose. I believe they have. Her handshake was firm, her gaze direct. I liked her immediately. Please call me Emily, I said. And yes, I could definitely use some assistance right now. Jennifer nodded and took a seat at the small dining table, opening her briefcase to remove several folders. Daniel, ever vigilant, positioned himself near the window where he could see both the door and the fire escape. Before we begin, Jennifer said, placing a digital recorder on the table, I need you to tell me exactly what happened today, every detail you can remember. For the next 20 minutes, I recounted the events from the board meeting to being abandoned on the roadside. Jennifer took notes, occasionally asking for clarification, but mostly listening intently. When I finished, she stopped the recorder and sat back in her chair. "What your father did constitutes reckless endangerment at minimum," she said, "possibly criminal negligence and financial abuse as well, given the pattern of behavior." She looked at Daniel. "You have the location data from both tracking devices?" He nodded. "And dashcam footage from my truck showing the location where I found her." "Good," Jennifer said. "Now, Emily, we need to discuss your uncle's provisions and your options." She opened the first folder and removed a document bound in blue legal paper. "2 years ago, your uncle David came to me with concerns about your father's behavior after your mother's death. He believed Michael was becoming increasingly unstable and controlling, particularly toward you. David created a contingency plan," she continued. "In the event that your father crossed certain boundaries, mechanisms would activate to protect you and your inheritance." "My inheritance?" I repeated, confused. "I don't have an inheritance yet. Everything is tied up in the company or my father's personal holdings." Jennifer smiled, a small, satisfied expression. "Not everything. Your mother had her own assets separate from the Thompson fortune assets that should have transferred to you upon her death." I stared at her, trying to process this information, but I never received anything after Mom died. "Father said all her assets were jointly held." "That's precisely what concerned your uncle," Jennifer said, removing more documents from her briefcase. "According to these financial records, your mother maintained several accounts and investments in her maiden name, valued at approximately $28 million. Upon her death, those assets should have transferred to you as per her will." My head spun. $28 million. My mother had left me financial independence, and I had never known. "Your father was the executor of her estate," Jennifer explained. "It appears he never disclosed these assets to you and may have been using them himself, which is a serious breach of fiduciary duty." "Is that legal?" I asked. "No," Jennifer said simply. "It's fraud, conversion of assets, and breach of trust, potentially criminal charges." She pulled out her laptop and turned it toward me. "With your credentials, can you access the company's financial records?" I hesitated only briefly before entering my login information. Jennifer navigated to several files, then showed me a series of transactions that made my stomach turn. My father had been systematically moving money from accounts labeled Mount Trust Fund, which I realized stood for Margaret Thompson, into various corporate and personal accounts. "This isn't just about money, Emily," Jennifer said gently. "This is about control. By keeping you financially dependent, your father maintained his power over you." Daniel, who had been silently observing, spoke up. "There's more to your uncle's contingency plan, isn't there, Jennifer?" She nodded, removing one final document from her briefcase. "This is perhaps the most significant piece. Your uncle David was a minority shareholder in Thompson Enterprises, holding 8% of the company. Upon his death, those shares were supposed to transfer to you. That never happened." I said, certain I would have known about such a transfer. "No, because your father concealed it, just as he concealed your mother's assets. But when combined with the shares your mother left you, which were also hidden from you, you actually own 51% of Thompson Enterprises. You are, legally speaking, the majority shareholder." The room seemed to tilt around me as the implications sank in. I owned controlling interest in the company. My father had been lying to me for years, manipulating me, keeping me under his thumb while illegally controlling my assets. As if on cue, my new phone rang. The screen displayed "Father," the contact having been programmed in advance by Daniel. I looked up at him and Jennifer, uncertain. "Answer it," Jennifer advised. "But do not let on that you know anything. Let him think you're still vulnerable and afraid." I took a deep breath and answered, putting the phone on speaker. "Emily." My father's voice came through the line, a mixture of irritation and forced concern. "Where are you? I expected you to call hours ago." "I would have called sooner," I said, careful to keep my voice small and contrite, "but I didn't have a phone." "You took it, remember?" "Don't be dramatic," he replied dismissively. "You could have borrowed a phone from anyone. Have you learned your lesson?" I glanced at Jennifer, who nodded encouragingly. "Yes, Father," I said, infusing my voice with false submission. "You were right. I shouldn't have challenged you in the meeting. It won't happen again." "Good," he said, sounding satisfied. "Where are you now?" "I'll send a car." "A friend picked me up," I said vaguely. "I can come home tonight if you want." "Yes, I think that would be best. We need to discuss your future role at the company." Perhaps something less visible would be more appropriate for your skills. Jennifer was making notes as he spoke, documenting every subtle threat. I'll be there soon, I promised, ending the call before my rising anger could betray me. Well done, Jennifer said approvingly. Now, we need to develop a strategy. I suggest a 3-phase approach. She outlined the plan methodically. Phase 1 involved gathering and securing evidence, including the financial records showing misappropriation of my inheritance. Phase 2 would involve confronting my father in a controlled environment with witnesses present. Phase 3 would be the formal legal proceedings to regain control of my assets and company shares. What should I do now? I asked when she finished. Should I go back to the house? Jennifer and Daniel exchanged a look. Yes, Daniel said finally, but not alone. I'll be nearby at all times. And you'll wear this. He handed me what looked like a stylish silver pendant on a chain. Recording device, he explained. Military grade, undetectable by standard sweepers. Play along with him for now, Jennifer advised. Let him believe he's won. We need 24 hours to prepare everything. Then we move. As they continued discussing details, I felt a strange calm settle over me. The fear and uncertainty were gone, replaced by a clear sense of purpose. My father had spent years trying to break me down, to make me doubt myself, to keep me under his control. Tomorrow, he would discover the daughter he had underestimated was about to reclaim everything he had taken from her. I returned to the family mansion that evening with an air of defeat, carefully crafted to satisfy my father. Daniel dropped me off 2 blocks away, watching from a distance as I walked the remaining distance, head bowed, shoulders slumped, the perfect picture of a chastened daughter returning to face her father's judgment. The house was lit up against the darkness, its colonial grandeur more imposing than welcoming. I entered using my key, the heavy front door closing behind me with an ominous thud. My father was waiting in the living room, nursing a glass of his favorite 18-year-old scotch, his reading glasses perched on his nose as he reviewed documents that I could now guess related to my hidden assets. Emily, he said, looking up with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. I hope your little adventure in the countryside was educational. It was, Father, I replied quietly. The recording pendant cooled against my skin beneath my borrowed sweatshirt. He took in my appearance with a slight grimace. Where did you get those clothes? A kind stranger helped me, I said, sticking to our agreed-upon script. I was very lucky. Indeed, he said, setting down his glass. Well, you must be hungry. Mrs. Larson left dinner for us. Double quotes, Mrs. Larson was our housekeeper of 20 years. One of the few constants in my life. I followed my father to the dining room, where 2 places were set at opposite ends of the long mahogany table. The physical distance was symbolic of the emotional gulf between us. Though he didn't realize, I now saw it clearly for what it was. A power play, not a family dinner. Throughout the meal, I played my part, keeping my eyes downcast, speaking only when spoken to, accepting his condescending lecture about loyalty and family responsibility without argument. All the while, the pendant recorded every word, every thinly veiled threat, every admission of his controlling behavior. I believe this incident has clarified your position, he said as we finished dessert. You're not ready for executive responsibilities. Tomorrow, I'll announce your transfer to the Community Relations Department. It's less demanding and more appropriate for someone of your temperament. Whatever you think is best, Father, I replied, hating the words even as I spoke them. He smiled, satisfied with my apparent submission. That's my girl. You know, Emily, these lessons may seem harsh, but they're necessary. The world is a cruel place, and I only want to prepare you for it. It took every ounce of self-control not to react to the breathtaking hypocrisy of his statement. Instead, I nodded meekly. May I be excused? I asked. It's been a long day. Of course, he said magnanimously. Get some rest. Tomorrow is a new beginning for us. I kissed his cheek, something I hadn't done voluntarily in years, and felt him stiffen in surprise before relaxing. The manipulation was working both ways. Now, in my room, I sent a pre-arranged text to Daniel confirming I was safely inside and the recording was underway. Then I showered, washing away the last physical remnants of the day's ordeal, and prepared for what would come next. Morning arrived with clear skies, as if the previous day's storm had never happened. I dressed with particular care, choosing a simple but elegant black sheath dress that projected both professionalism and confidence. Today would be the last day Michael Thompson underestimated his daughter. At precisely 8:15, we left for the office in separate cars, my father heading in first for his 9 o'clock executive committee meeting where he planned to announce my demotion. I followed 30 minutes later, texting Daniel and Jennifer that I was on my way. They were waiting for me in the parking garage, along with Susan Mitchell from Finance and Edward Collins, our senior board member. Both looked solemn but determined. "Are you ready for this?" Jennifer asked, handing me a leather portfolio containing the documents we had prepared the night before. "I've been ready for 5 years," I replied, straightening my shoulders. "Let's go." We took the executive elevator directly to the 30th floor conference room. Timing our arrival for 15 minutes into my father's meeting, Daniel positioned himself discreetly outside the door, while Jennifer, Susan, Edward, and I entered without knocking. My father was in midst, standing at the head of the table, addressing the 7 members of the executive committee. He faltered when he saw us, surprise quickly turning to anger. "What is the meaning of this interruption?" he demanded, his gaze hardening as it fixed on me. "Emily, this meeting is for executive staff only. You can wait in your office until I call for you." "Actually, Father," I replied, my voice steady and clear, "this meeting concerns you directly. You might want to sit down." For perhaps the first time in his life, Michael Thompson was momentarily speechless. I took advantage of his silence to address the room. "I apologize for the interruption, but serious matters have come to light that affect the leadership and future of Thompson Enterprises. This is ridiculous." My father recovered, his face flushing with anger. "Security will escort you out if necessary." Edward Collins stepped forward. "As senior board member, I have authorized this intervention. Michael, please sit down and listen." My father's eyes darted from face to face, assessing the situation. Slowly, reluctantly, he lowered himself into his chair. I opened the portfolio and removed the first set of documents, which Jennifer distributed to everyone at the table. "These papers detail the systematic misappropriation of personal assets left to me by my mother, Margaret Thompson," I said. "For the past 5 years, Michael Thompson has illegally diverted approximately $28 million from accounts that rightfully belonged to me." Murmurs of shock rippled through the room. My father's face had gone from red to white. "This is absurd," he sputtered. "Emily is confused about standard estate management procedures." Susan Mitchell spoke next, her financial expertise lending weight to her words. "I've reviewed these records personally, Michael. There's no confusion. These transactions constitute fraud and breach of fiduciary duty." My father stood abruptly. "This meeting is over. I won't be ambushed in my own company by my ungrateful daughter and her accomplices." "Your company?" I asked, removing the next document from my portfolio. "That brings us to the second issue." Jennifer stepped forward. "For the past 2 years, Michael Thompson has concealed the fact that Emily Thompson is the majority shareholder of Thompson Enterprises, having inherited her mother's 20% stake and her uncle David's 31% stake. Combined, Emily controls 51% of this company." The room erupted in shocked exclamations. My father slammed his fist on the table. "This is a coup," he shouted, "based on lies and manipulated documents." I removed the silver pendant from around my neck and placed it on the table, pressing a button to activate the playback function. My father's voice filled the room, crystal clear. "These lessons may seem harsh, but they're necessary. One day, you'll thank me." I fast-forwarded to an earlier conversation from his car. "Consider this a lesson in humility. Your phone, your wallet, too. A little discomfort builds character." And finally, the most damning, "When you're ready to apologize and remember your place, you can call me. If you can find a phone." As his own words condemned him, my father's face transformed with rage. He lunged toward me, fists clenched, but before he could reach me, Daniel appeared as if from nowhere, stepping between us with calm, professional efficiency. "That's enough, Mr. Thompson," he said, his voice low but authoritative. "Who the hell are you?" my father demanded, his body still tense with the desire to attack. "Daniel Harris. Private security, hired by David Montgomery to protect his niece from you." My father's eyes widened in recognition. "The tracker in Emily's car." "You, that's right," Daniel confirmed. "I've been watching you for 2 years, documenting every incident, every threat, every manipulation. This is absurd." My father tried again, looking around the room for support and finding none. "She's my daughter. I have every right to discipline her as I see fit." "She's 26 years old," Jennifer countered, "and abandoning her miles from home in a rainstorm isn't discipline, it's criminal endangerment." Edward Collins cleared his throat. "Michael, I think it would be best if you stepped out while the board discusses these developments." Susan, would you please call an emergency board meeting for noon today? My father's face contorted with fury and disbelief. You can't do this. I built this company from nothing. It's mine. 51% of it is mine. I corrected him quietly, and I'm exercising my right as majority shareholder to call for a vote on your continued leadership. For a moment, I thought he might physically attack me despite Daniel's presence. Then, abruptly, the fight seemed to drain out of him, replaced by cold calculation. Fine, he said, straightening his tie. Have your meeting. This isn't over, Emily. With that, he stalked from the room, the other executives partying to let him pass. When the door closed behind him, I released a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. Susan approached and squeezed my arm supportively. You did well, she said. Very well indeed. Edward nodded in agreement. Your mother would be proud. Emily, she always said you had a steel spine beneath that gentle exterior. 2 security guards appeared at the door. Summoned discreetly by Daniel, Mr. Thompson has been escorted to his office to collect personal items, one reported. He'll be monitored until he leaves the building. Thank you, I said, suddenly feeling the weight of what had just transpired. We'll reconvene at noon for the board meeting. As the room cleared, Jennifer stayed behind with me and Daniel. Phase 2 complete, she said with satisfaction. Now we prepare for the formal proceedings. Your father won't go quietly, Emily, he'll fight this with everything he has. I know, I replied, looking out the window at the Chicago skyline, the same view that had intimidated me just yesterday morning. But he taught me one valuable lesson after all. What's that? Daniel asked. I turned to face them both, my resolve stronger than ever. Never start a fight you're not prepared to finish. The emergency board meeting that followed was tense but decisive. With the evidence presented and my status as majority shareholder confirmed, the board voted unanimously to temporarily suspend Michael Thompson from his position as CEO, pending a full investigation into the financial improprieties. I watched from the boardroom window as my father was escorted from the building by security, his rigid posture and clenched fists betraying his fury even from 30 floors up. As his car pulled away from the curb, I felt no triumph, no vindictive pleasure. Only a profound sense of relief tinged with sadness for what our relationship had become. What could have been? But as Jennifer had said, this wasn't over. It was only beginning. 6 months after the confrontation at Thompson Enterprises, I sat in what had once been my father's office, now mine. The view of Lake Michigan hadn't changed, but everything else had. The dark, heavy furniture had been replaced with lighter, more contemporary pieces. The intimidating wall of business awards and photos with politicians had given way to a gallery of environmentally sustainable projects, including the first completed Thompson Green development. The transition hadn't been easy. My father had fought the changes with every legal resource at his disposal, but the evidence against him was overwhelming. The financial fraud charges had been settled out of court to avoid public scandal. With full restitution of my mother's assets plus interest, the company restructuring had been more challenging, with some longtime executives loyal to my father resigning in protest. But we had weathered the storm. Susan Mitchell had been promoted to CFO. Edward Collins remained as chairman of the board, and new blood had been brought in to revitalize the company culture. The Thompson Green Initiative was now our fastest-growing division, with 3 major projects underway and a waiting list of clients interested in sustainable commercial spaces. A soft knock at the door interrupted my thoughts. Daniel entered, as always, moving with that quiet efficiency that had become so familiar to me. Your 2 o'clock is here, he said. I nodded, taking a deep breath. Show him in, please. A moment later, my father walked into the office. 6 months had changed him as well. His hair seemed grayer, his face more lined. He had lost weight, and the almost manic energy that had always surrounded him was subdued. He wore a suit that, while still expensive, lacked the imposing perfection he had once demanded of his appearance. Emily, he said, his voice stiff but not hostile. Thank you for coming, Father, I replied, gesturing to the chair across from my desk. Would you like coffee? He shook his head. I can't stay long. An awkward silence filled the room. Despite everything we needed to discuss, finding the right words was still difficult. We had communicated through lawyers for months, this being our first face-to-face meeting since the day he was escorted from the building. The company looks good, he said finally, glancing at the quarterly report on my desk. The green division exceeded projections. Yes, I agreed. Your idea to focus on medical facilities was particularly successful. He looked surprised that I would acknowledge his contribution. After his suspension, he had sent some suggestions through his attorney. one of which had indeed been valuable. "I see you kept the Larson painting," he observed, nodding toward the landscape that had hung in this office for as long as I could remember. "Mom loved that painting," I said simply. Another silence, less strained this time. "Why did you ask me here, Emily?" he finally asked. I leaned forward, meeting his gaze directly. "Because it's time we talked about what happened. Not through lawyers or mediators, just us." He shifted uncomfortably. "What's done is done." "No," I said firmly. "We need to address it if we're ever going to move forward. I need to understand why you did what you did, the control, the manipulation, keeping my inheritance from me, abandoning me on that road. All of it." For a moment, I thought he would refuse, retreating behind the wall of defensiveness he had maintained for months. Then his shoulders slumped slightly. "After your mother died, I was lost," he admitted, the words seeming to pain him. "Margaret was always the one who understood you, who knew how to connect. I only knew how to prepare you for a harsh world, by being harsher than the world could ever be." I asked, keeping my voice gentle despite the painful memories. He winced. "I thought I was making you stronger. The business world destroyed my father because he was too soft, too trusting. I didn't want that for you. So, you decided to break me down yourself," I pressed. "I never saw it that way," he said, a flash of the old defensiveness returning. "I was protecting you the only way I knew how. And my inheritance, the company shares, was hiding those from me. Protection, too." He looked away, unable to meet my eyes. "That was wrong. I know that now. After Margaret died, I was afraid of losing control of everything: the company, you, our future. I convinced myself it was temporary, that I would tell you when you were ready." "And when would that have been?" I asked. "When I was completely broken, when I had no will left of my own." He had no answer for that, and we both knew it. "I never meant to hurt you that day in the rain," he said after a long pause. "I just wanted to teach you a lesson about respect." "No, Father," I countered. "You wanted to teach me about power, your power over me. But you taught me something else entirely." "What's that?" he asked, meeting my gaze again. "That true strength isn't about controlling others. It's about having the courage to stand up for yourself, even against those who should have protected you." He absorbed this in silence, his expression unreadable. "I've been seeing someone," he said abruptly. "A therapist." This surprised me. My father had always dismissed therapy as weakness, a crutch for people who couldn't handle reality. "Dr. Patricia Morrison," he continued. "She specializes in controlling behavior and emotional abuse." The words clearly cost him, an admission I never thought I'd hear. "She's helping me understand why I became the man I did, the patterns I learned from my own father. It doesn't excuse what I did to you, but maybe it explains some of it." I nodded, a knot of emotion forming in my throat. "Thank you for telling me. What happens now?" he asked, and for the first time in my life, I saw vulnerability in my father's eyes. I stood and walked to the window, gathering my thoughts before turning back to him. "I can't forget what happened," I said honestly. "The trust between us is broken, perhaps beyond repair. But we can try to build something new, something healthier, with boundaries and respect." "I'd like that," he said quietly. "It'll take time," I cautioned, "and work. Real work on your part, especially." "I understand." I returned to my desk and picked up a folder, handing it to him. "These are the terms I'm proposing. You can return to the company as a consultant, focusing on the areas where your expertise is valuable, but the board remains as is. And I retain control of operations." He accepted the folder without opening it. "That sounds fair." As he rose to leave, he paused, looking around the office once more. "You've done well, Emily. Better than I would have." Coming from him, it was perhaps the highest compliment possible. After he left, Daniel entered quietly. "You okay?" I nodded, surprised to find that I actually was. I don't forgive him. Not completely. I'm not sure I ever will, but I understand him better now. Understanding doesn't mean you have to let him back into your life, Daniel reminded me. "No," I agreed, "but it means I can move forward without carrying all that anger and hurt." That's freedom in its own way. In the months that followed, life settled into a new normal. My father and I established a cautious professional relationship with personal boundaries firmly in place. He continued his therapy, and I occasionally joined him for family sessions that were painful but healing. The company thrived under the new direction, with the Thompson Green Initiative expanding nationally. I found my voice as a leader, different from my father's authoritarian style, but effective in its own way. Daniel remained by my side, his role evolving from bodyguard to trusted advisor to something more personal that we were still defining day by day. With his encouragement, I established the Montgomery Foundation, named after my uncle, dedicated to supporting victims of domestic abuse and financial control. At one of the foundation's first events, I shared my story publicly for the first time. The response was overwhelming, with countless others coming forward with similar experiences of control and manipulation by loved ones. Standing at the podium that evening, looking out at the sea of faces, both sympathetic and hopeful, I finally understood the most profound lesson from my journey. True power isn't found in controlling others, but in controlling your own response to adversity. My father had tried to break me down to mold me into someone who would bend to his will. Instead, he had inadvertently forged something stronger, someone who knew her own worth beyond any external validation. That rainy day when he left me on the roadside was meant to be my lowest point. Instead, it became the moment I found my way back to myself, the self my mother and uncle had always believed in, the self that had been waiting to emerge from the shadow of fear and control. Sometimes, the greatest lessons come from the most painful experiences. My father had taught me that, though not in the way he intended. And in the end, standing in the rain had washed away the last of my doubts about who I truly was and what I was capable of becoming. Have you ever had to stand up to someone who tried to control you? How did you find the strength to break free? Share your story in the comments below. And don't forget to like and subscribe if this resonated with you. Remember, sometimes our greatest strength emerges in our most vulnerable moments. Thank you for listening to my story, and I hope it gives you courage for whatever challenges you're facing in your own life.